Well, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Cody McKee. I'm a staff specialist with the Department of Wildlife. Today we've got some biologists here with the game division. I'd consider them to be more experts in elk biology than myself. And we're going to have a Creekside Chat. We've been talking about doing something like this for a while. Maybe trying to mimic elk camp a little bit, although we'll probably keep the conversation a little bit lighter on some topics than others. But yeah, we're here to give you a little bit of information about what it is that we do, why we love elk, why we think that elk is something worth emphasizing, which is what we're doing this week for Elk Week. We're here at the base of the Ruby Mountains, Spring Creek Campground. Beautiful location, and for those of you that have spent any time in elk camp, you might see something here that reminds you of what that experience was like. So with that, I've got Travis Allen, Kari Huebner, and Matt Jeffress, all out of our Elko Eastern, or our Eastern Region office here in Elko. And I'm going to go through, I'm just going to ask these guys to give a brief introduction about themselves, how they came along and got with the department and became a biologist, and what's getting them out of bed in the morning to come and do this fun job every day. So Trav, if you want to start, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm Travis Allen. I'm the Area 6 game biologist for the department, and I grew up in rural Northern California. Just spent most of my childhood outside cruising around the woods, just trying to get my eyes on critters. My family hunted. I myself didn't hunt at a young age, but I was always around it. And then as I got into college, I learned that there was a whole career based on wildlife and wildlife management and biology, and so I pretty quickly dove full head into that. Got a degree there at UNR in wildlife ecology and conservation, and just started working on deer and elk projects, bighorn sheep projects across the West, and was very fortunate to find myself in a job like this where I get to spend so much time outdoors, so much time doing things I love, so much elk camp-like activities on a daily basis, and really makes me excited. And elk are a pretty fantastic resource that we have in the state, so excited to talk about them.
Yeah, thanks Trav. How about you, Kari? Let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kari Huebner. I'm going on almost my 25th year with NDOW, but first 5 years I was in the fish hatchery system, but then got into this biologist position up here in Northeast Nevada. It's area 7, 8, and 9 in particular, and that was almost about 20 years ago now, and so it's been a while. And when I first got the position, elk were just starting to kind of take off in Northeast Nevada, and I really got to see some of our peaks, and then getting back down to some of our population objectives, seeing the whole gamut. But yeah, I got interested always was outside and spending time outdoors with my family. Everybody in my family were hunters, so it was just kind of what we did growing up, camping and hunting. And I didn't get into hunting as early just because I was going to college, doing different things, just didn't apply. But as soon as I got done with college, I went to University of Wyoming, got my wildlife degree, and when I got back, I started putting in for tags, and the very first animal I ever harvested was a cow elk, and so that was my first experience. It was awesome. I was hooked, and then lucky enough to get this position where I get to work with some of the most elk resource we have in the state, and so it's been an awesome experience, and I'm really glad that we're doing this to highlight those magnificent creatures that they are. So
Yeah, absolutely magnificent. And yeah. I think when we started this, I really wanted to just say like how honored I am to be sitting here with you guys, because as I drove out today, I was thinking about my experiences with you guys, and like Matt and I, we go way back to our college days, probably 20 years ago right now. Mm-hmm. And Kari, you bring such a wealth of information to the agency and the elk resource, and then we have Trav here, the young gun maverick, coming in, but such a critical thinker about your resource. Mm-hmm. And everybody brings something different to the table, and I think that's really part of what makes both this agency great, but also what I think is really cool about how we're managing our elk resource, because we have to use slightly different strategies as across the state depending on where you're at. And so with that, I'm gonna jump over here to Matt and give you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself and your upbringing and how you ended up here at the department.
Perfect. Yeah, Matt Jeffress. I native Nevada, and I grew up in Winnemucca. Was born in Reno, but spent most of my years growing up in Winnemucca. My dad was a game biologist with the Department of Wildlife, so it's pretty hard to not love this type of work when you get to do it from a really early age. He tried to talk me out of it quite a bit, but did not work.
Successful.
Spent 2 years at UNR and then transferred up to University of Idaho, where I met you. Graduated, spent a little bit of time in Kansas with my then girlfriend, now wife, and then got hired on with NDOW in Vegas, working with Desert Bighorn sheep with Pat Cummings. Did that for about 3 years, and then transferred up here into the Area 6 position that Travis has now. Did that for 9 years, and then I've been in a new job, not working with elk so much, but still have a small elk resource in 065. So just to echo what everyone else said, I mean, elk are just an awesome resource, and a lot of great memories of working in the Bruno and working, on the other Area 6 elk herds, and all the challenges and successes of managing elk. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And we talk about challenges and successes, and again, we're in the midst of Elk Week, which is something new that we're sort of feeling out and trying to see what works and what doesn't. But one of the things that we posted yesterday, and it seems like it got some interest, was a bugling bull. So we picked this time because this is kind of the peak of the rut. This is the really exciting time if you're out in the field right now, whether you're hunting or whether you're wildlife viewing. Experiencing a bugling bull is something that I think is really unmatched, especially in North America. Do you guys want to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on right now? I mean, it's fun to see bulls bugle, but there's definitely a reason behind that. And Kari, you want to kind of explain to folks that are following along, like what's happening?
Yeah, so as Cody said, it's that time of year. The rut's going on, which is obviously the mating season for elk, basically. And these bulls, as the cows come into estrus, kind of starts things, gets things going, and the bulls start gathering together harems. They're called harems, where they get together quite a few of the cows and calves, and they'll fight to keep those cows and calves. And so it's a whole process where they all get together and they try and keep as many cows and calves as they can. Other bulls will come in and challenge, and that's a lot what that bugle is. It's saying, I'm here and these are my cows, and other bulls hear that. They can tell by the graveliness of the bugle, like how big of a bull it might be. Sometimes you've got these young bulls that are just barely starting to understand what's going on, and they'll come in and try and compete, but it's usually those big bulls. They'll fight, they get pretty tore up. I've been surprised over the years how many times our game wardens have to do a lot of investigations this time of year, because they'll see dead bull elk and they assume maybe it's a wounding loss from a hunt or something like that, but it's actually where another bull has gored and killed a bull fighting. So it gets intense. You see they break off their antlers and all that's competition to see who's the biggest bull, the most physically fit, and he earns the right to breed the cows that he has. And there's a thought that maybe some of the really big bulls kind of sit back and let the little bulls get the cows all together, and then they just show up and take over. So that absolutely happens. So that's going on right now. So that's what the bugling's about. It's a little bit different in north versus south. Sometimes you'll hear bulls bugling a little bit earlier, like around the Ely area and stuff, and then later on the northern. So a lot of it has to do with temperatures and time of year, but it's mainly driven by the cows. So and then as we're talking about these things, I'm sure there's lots of questions. Everybody has a lot of different experiences with elk. Some people might be just learning about elk for the first time, and some people may be veteran hunters. But as people have questions, feel free to go ahead and write them in on Facebook Live, and we'll try and address them as we go along here.
Yeah, definitely, Kari. Thanks for that. we talk about the rut, kind of how that's getting stuff started, the mating season, but then that kind of rolls into the next part of the annual cycle, and that's going to be calving season. So, Travis, you want to tell us a little bit about kind of what happens next spring, and kind of what's happening until we get through to that point where calves are getting a little bit bigger and a little more able to be on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rut is obviously the breeding system, and elk generally have a gestation period of like 250 or so days. So they're having calves in late May, June, sometimes July as well. And so we're at that time of year, cows are breaking off into individuals, and they're having their calves, and they're spending some time alone with their calf, imprinting on that calf, and then bringing them back into a group where they can feel more eyes or safety. And so it's all about just protecting that resource. Cows can give birth on their first year. They generally don't have as high of success. You might determine that it's good to save those resources for yourself, depending on how your winter was. If you were in poor shape coming into it, you might decide that it's not worth losing your own life to save your calf's life, and so they might be more successful on a second year. But twinning is pretty unlikely in elk. Generally, it's just a singleton. And there have been cases of twins and triplets even, but for the most part, elk are giving birth to singletons.
Yeah, really cool stuff. I mean, the elk life history, in my opinion, is very unique, and we certainly follow it very closely. In fact, we're conducting annual surveys via helicopter. We conduct population modeling, and that all goes into a better understanding of our populations. And I was hoping maybe Matt could give us a little bit of clarity on what that whole process looks like from the time we collect population information to the modeling process, and how we arrive at those quotas that we look at year to year.
Yeah, I think you're the expert, but I'll take a stab at it. So in my mind, it starts with our postseason surveys, which are usually midwinter surveys, and so you're collecting composition on bulls, cows, and calves. And the really important driver of that is the calf ratio, and that tells you if the population's growing or contracting or staying the same. We have survival rates built in for cows and bulls of different age classes and in different structures. And then we get all of that important information back from the hunters on harvest, and that's why it's so important to fill out the hunter questionnaire after you have a tag, whether you're successful or not, and what you harvested. And then we throw that into the model. It tells you what was taken out and then what's going in with the calves, and we can predict if the population's going up and we're close to population objective, then we maybe need to raise tags. If things are going down, if you have a poor calf crop and high success the previous year, then maybe you need to back off a little bit. And just kind of in a general sense, we formulate our recommendations. We give that out to the 17 county advisory boards, and then they take input from or the commission takes input from the cabs and from NDOW and the public, and that's how we get at quotas for the next year, and it all starts over again.
Well, there was a lot to unpack there. Actually, I thought of a couple different questions as we went through it. So, I think the first thing that I want to maybe have Kari touch on a little bit here would be, you mentioned our population objectives, and I think there might be some confusion or misconceptions about what population objective is, and how that might relate to like a biological carrying capacity. Two totally different things, and we're really bound towards managing to the population objective. So, Kari, if you want to talk a little bit about how we got to those numbers and kind of what that means year to year when we're establishing quotas.
Yeah, back when we were reintroducing elk into Nevada, we went through a lot of planning, and there was a statewide plan, but there's also sub-plans for each elk herd. And that got groups of people together, diverse group of people. You had livestock representatives, you had hunters, you had department employees, general public, everybody. And elk are a lot different than like deer or antelope, where we're usually just trying to maintain populations to whatever the carrying capacity of the land is. But in elk management, there was some criteria about overlap with livestock and how that might go. So there's a lot of things that got put in there about like distance to water, how much available suitable habitat there was, a lot of considerations. So it's not so much carrying capacity of what the land can support, but more of what's socially acceptable in that particular area. Early on, a lot of people, I think, were very concerned about, and maybe rightly so in some instances, that elk were going to cause a lot of depredation issues, meaning that they would just want to go on to alfalfa fields or things like that. And there was a lot of concern. So in those initial plans, and including our statewide plan, there's a lot of things to cover, like what we do if that happens, and tools in the toolboxes to address those issues. And so, yeah, it's pretty conservative by nature. Our population objectives that were set in each one of those subplans are pretty conservative, and it was based on just kind of not knowing. People were concerned if you got an elk population that was above carrying capacity, could we even manage elk through hunting to that level? And we even had some of those same questions ourselves, because I can speak to Jarbidge herd. It was growing tremendously, and we were having a hard time getting elk harvested in the wilderness because people just weren't going in farther. But we came up with wilderness hunts, we came up with late season hunts, different ideas of ways to get things. For a while there, you could get with your deer tag, you got an elk tag, so we didn't have too many people in the field, but we were still getting opportunity to harvest elk in there. So there's been a lot of trials and tribulations, but the beauty of it is I think that we've shown that we can do it. So we've got these population objectives, and that's what each one of us does. We keep that in mind. What is our herd doing? How is it growing? How is the harvest going? And then we set our quotas to keep it at that level for this time until potentially that number is ever looked at again or decided maybe it needs to be brought up again. But for now, that's what we're bound to. So when people see the changes in elk tags, it usually has to do with that population objective, not so much that the elk aren't doing well or they're doing too well or something like that. It's in response to that.
Yeah, and there might be changes just in unit groupings to target harvest in a particular area. I mean, there's a lot of considerations that go into the way that we are setting our seasons for sure.
Yeah.
And I know we had a question about our season structures and what goes into that. And I think for this particular question, it's asked, why do we offer our archery seasons the way that we do? Can there be more overlap with the rut and maybe a deviation from our any legal weapon and muzzleloader seasons? And I think when I think about that question, I think about all the different hunting seasons that we have going on at the same time, how we have these long linear mountain ranges where a lot of our game populations are concentrated, so we have a lot of overlap. And so and then also just the vulnerability of animals during certain times of the year. We have a couple of rut-centric muzzleloader and rifle seasons, but those have a kind of a long tradition of being established in the state that people have grown familiar with and they really like. On the other hand, we're just trying to balance the opportunity as best as we can and give people in the field, minimize congestion, try and hit our target harvest rates. As people think about why seasons are the way they are, there's a lot of thought that we put into it. You mentioned, Kari, when you were discussing the management plans and sub-plans, you talked about some of our depredation programs. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give Trav or Matt, an opportunity. You guys want to kind of touch on those programs and what we've implemented to try and get ahead of some of those potential problems that we saw coming down?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to one tool that we use in Area 6 on basically an annual basis, and that's the landowner antlerless hunt. And it's a situation where we have elk coming down onto alfalfa, onto pivots, onto farmland that it's to an intolerable level. And so the idea behind this hunt is it provides the landowner the opportunity to gain tags that they can use to remove elk from that land, to push the group of elk off their fields, and keep them hopefully on public land and off of that private. And so that landowner antlerless hunt is one tool that we have in the toolbox.
Yeah, and we also collect a $5 damage fee on all of our elk applications. And Matt, do you want to speak to kind of where that $5 application fee goes to and what we're using it for currently?
Yeah. Yeah, so the $5 goes into a special account. It's used for ameliorating elk damage on private lands, either in fencing, exclusionary fencing. We've done that around haystacks. We've fenced entire, alfalfa pivots, and then also paying for damages, because it is a real cost. I mean, I think early when I was in Area 6, we had a pretty tough winter mixed with drought conditions, and we had several hundred elk hitting dairy grade alfalfa in Boulder Valley, and to the tune of in excess of over $100,000 of damage. Luckily at the time, the owner didn't want a payment, but we did opt for a depredation hunt to try to push those animals off. So depredation hunts are something else we have. I don't think we've seen a lot of those in the recent past, but we have had some properties. I think in Area 12 we've had a depredation hunt, but that's we can set up a hunt to address depredation issues in a specific time frame to push animals away. And it's really the goal is we don't want conflicts with elk and private landowners, and so we have that $5 fee that can fence or pay people out and come up with long-term solutions. We got the private land antlerless hunt like Travis talked about. That's really great. The landowners get to pick the hunters. With a depredation hunt, we pick alternate hunters, so they don't really have a say in who's hunting. But we have a lot of tools to try to teach elk to stay away from agricultural interest and stay wild.
And I'll just jump in that even though that's like depredation on, hay meadows and stuff that those livestock owners need for their cattle and that type of thing, but there's also a lot of private landowners out there that just have natural rangeland. And early on, the department decided to have an incentive for having elk on your property. And so we also have the incentive tag program, and I'm probably the most familiar with that just because Northeast Nevada has the most private land in it, and so there's a ton of applicants there, and landowners sign up and they get basically you figure out how much time the elk are spending on private rangelands, and this is not alfalfa and that type of thing, and then you can qualify for tags in which that landowner can sell. And so some people are probably aware of that you can buy tags from landowners for certain, and it's good for that unit group. But that's just another incentive for those folks that have elk on their property where there's a lot of checkerboard land or just other private property where they don't mind the elk being there, but it's just a compensation back to them in the form of those incentive tags to allow elk to be there and manage and graze and live on their private lands. So that's another tool in that toolbox.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Kari, because what we're really talking about with these private lands programs, we offer programs where we're de-incentivizing elk to be on property, but then like with the incentive program, we're actually incentivizing elk, and we're trying to get tolerance. And to be honest, that tolerance has gone a long ways towards us being able to establish elk like we have done, and for our elk program to be as successful in my eyes as I think that it has become. So now, guys, I want to just jump into elk within your specific areas. Matt, during the little break that we just experienced, we talked a little bit about your management responsibilities, and then also if you could speak a little bit to the Area 10 elk herd, that is a depredation area, and what that means, how it came to become a depredation zone.
Perfect. Yeah, so now I manage elk in Hunt Unit 065, and it has a pretty low objective, but we're way below that. And we had a hunt for a few years. Hunt was fairly unsuccessful. Hunters had a hard time filling tags, and we quickly realized that just elk are not growing at the rate we needed. So unfortunately, we had to shut the hunt down. I believe it was last year, but there's still elk. There's still elk in there, but they are loosely tied to Area 10. So we've had collared elk, and they'll leave 065 and go to Area 10. In Area 10, specifically hunt units 101, 102, and 103 is a elk exclusionary zone that came out of the Western Elko County Elk Management Plan that the Bruno and the rest of Area 6 and 065 are in. And it was, I think it was just kind of an agreement or a concession amongst all parties that, you know, we would allow elk in these other areas, but we don't want elk in hunt unit 101, 102, and 103. And so that's why we have the ongoing depredation hunts in 101, 102, and 103 for cows and bulls. And I know there was a question on somebody wanted to know how they could be more successul on bull hunts in the depredation area, and it's that's $1 million question. That's a challenge. I mean, it's really tough. It's a depredation hunt. I think majority of all of our depredation hunts are meant to be fairly tough, fairly low success, because we're putting out enough tags to put pressure on to either drive animals out of an area or greatly reduce or eliminate animals. And so that's what we're doing in the Rubies and in East Humboldt's, and it's tough. I feel for the gentleman that wants to be more successful, but it's it's a tough go of it.
Yeah.
So, did that answer?
Yeah. I think the short of it was just keep trying hard.
Keep at it.
Yeah, there's
Keep
easier areas, but
I mean, you know, speaking for myself, that certainly is one of the tags I'd love to draw, only because I'm in a waiting period right now, and that's my only bull elk hunting opportunity that I have. So I think maybe all of us are in that boat currently, or I forgot.
one of us might have gotten lucky and drew a bull tag this year. So
3 of the 4 of us. Yeah. But you know, Matt, you actually mentioned one thing, and I really wanted to highlight that why we had this conversation. Concessions. Concessions made when subplans were developed. And I think when I think of concession, I think of compromise. And honestly, all of our subplans are filled with compromises, and frankly, they're compromises made by us. They're compromises made by multiple users on the landscape, recreationists, the land management agencies, the livestock industry. We all made compromises. All right, so we'll welcome everybody back. We're obviously having a little bit of technical difficulties today, but that's what happens when you're at elk camp.
Yep.
You don't always have great service. So I think when we last chatted, I was just talking about the compromises that have been made to get to where we're at today with our elk populations, and I do think that it really is important to recognize that while I believe that as an agency we've done a fantastic job with our elk management and restoring and allowing certain areas to grow, there's been a lot of partners along the way. You know, the people that are you know, using the land for you know, their livelihoods, the NGOs, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. I mean, there's a lot of people along the way that have helped us to get to where we're at now. But I know we were going to talk a little bit about just what's going on in your area with your elk herds, and so took a little detour, and now I'm going to kick it back over to Trav, and let's hear about Area 6 and some of the things that you've been working on.
Yeah, so Big 6, which is 6'2", 6'4", 6'6", through 6'8", is just below our objective for our population. We're sitting just below 500 elk. So this is kind of what maintenance mode's looking like. It's a herd that has 2 different migratory strategies, and so we got shared summer range in 6'2", 6'7", and then we got migrations that run one north out into Idaho and one south towards the snowstorms along the south end of the desert there. And right now, you know, we've changed our hunt structures a little bit just to try to allow for a little bit of growth on that southern population. You know, most of the elk historic range in 6'8", 6'6", 6'7" is not being fully utilized, and so we're trying to allow that to become a larger proportion of our 500 elk while putting more pressure on that northern subherd, just to have some larger elk populations that are more available to sportsmen all year. And then in the Bruno, there isn't a population objective for the Bruno other than habitat based, so it's a unique one for the state in that sense, and that herd's doing well, productive, providing opportunity for sportsmen. It's a really cool opportunity to work with with the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, Idaho, and the Department of Wildlife all working together on kind of one meta population of elk. So it's a interesting elk herd with a really cool dynamic.
Yeah, thanks for that, Trav. You know, you had, as I recall, we did make a change this year to one of your seasons, right? One of the most effective tools that we have to control population growth is through our female harvest, because, I mean, frankly, there's not a lot of things that kill elk in Nevada aside from maybe a few isolated areas. But for instance, in your neck of the woods, we closed down a lot of the units to antlerless harvest in Big 6, and so now we're forcing or focusing hunters in 062 to help us with that portion of that suburb.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Kari, you want to take over, and you know, let's hear about what's happening out in your country.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back a little bit, and we haven't really talked about another tool that us biologists use, and that's collaring elk. People have to understand that we've learned a lot about our elk. Back when Matt was the biologist in Travis's area, we were constantly trained to figure out, because we get one snapshot on our flights in the winter, and we see where those elk are wintering. But for example, some of those Jarbidge and Bruno herds that go clear out into Idaho to winter, and we'd go out there and classify them, and we didn't know how many of those elk were staying out in Idaho, were resident Idaho elk, how many were Nevada elk that were migrating out into there. And so we've used collars to really help us manage elk, and that's to determine where are they during the hunting season when we're trying to target them with harvest, and then where are they spending time, and then that helps with objectives too, because we know where they're spending time and how many elk you truly have on the landscape in certain areas, right? So we've done a ton of that in all our areas, but in Area 7 in particular, we've been able to better manage that Jarbidge population. For a while, that herd would just almost seem to be growing exponentially, but what we found is some of them were sharing winter range with some of the Area 6 elk, and then we found a lot of different things. One of the questions that came in early was asking how long elk live, and that's another thing through our collaring that we found out is some of these elk are living a really long time. As you mentioned, we don't have a ton of predators. You know, I mean, mountain lions will target some elk sometimes, but we don't have a lot of the typical predators that most elk populations have, and so elk really are long-lived. We're finding, do you guys remember did we find one that was at least 16, right?
There was a cow harvested out of the Bruno that was one of the originally released elk as a calf, and she was 22 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And she had a calf with her when the hunter harvested her. So
it's just amazing.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's one of the
22
things.
years on the landscape.
That's one of the things we've had to adjust is originally our models only took them up to 15, 16, and we found out that cows were living into their 20s, and not only living into their 20s, but having calves and all of that. So it makes it hard to manage populations when you're missing the mark like that. So we've really been having to learn, but it's been a great process. I think we're really starting to understand it, and you realize never underestimate an elk, because they're certainly adaptable. That's the other thing. You know, where a lot of our landscapes, our deer are really having a tough time with fires and different things that happen. It seems like elk can make it on the desert. They can be up in subalpine fir, limber pine. They can be, they're high, low, and everywhere in between. And so I think that's the great part about elk, but it also makes them hard to kind of figure out where they're going to be, when, and why. And what we're finding is they're everywhere they want to be. So that's been good. But to round it out, we're pretty much at population objective in everything in the area that I manage. 091 is a herd that we co-manage with Utah, and so we do those interactions where Utah hunters can hunt on the Nevada side for 081 during that hunting season, and the Nevada hunters can hunt on the Utah side, because that herd there's too much intermixing across the state landscape for us to be able to do it independently. But all the others, we're doing pretty good. I think they're showing growth, and they would like to grow. Our elk would like to grow, but of course we're keeping them down to the population objectives at this point. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you mentioning the overall adaptability of elk, because I think especially in a state like Nevada, where our landscape has changed so much. We're seeing conversions from shrublands to grasslands, which really are very conducive to elk and their ability to survive when you get those grassland systems. Certainly helps them here, and it also poses some challenges for us when we have ultra high survival and abilities to move long distances. And speaking of long distances, I think this is a good point. We can jump into some of the questions that came in that we haven't addressed yet. And one of those questions is whether elk practice wintering migration, and then there's a follow-up question to this about whether they shed their horns in these areas. And I think, Matt, because you were kind of the spearhead on some of that interstate radio collaring and monitoring on the Bruno and southern Idaho, and you learned a lot from that information. I think I'm going to have you speak to this question a little bit and what we've seen in some of our elk herds, because I think there's some mixed strategies there.
Yeah, thanks. I think we see two strategies. We see just like an elevational strategy in some of our elk, where they just drop out of mountains down to the valley floor. And then particularly up north in 6 and 7, I think through the collaring meeting, we really learned you do have some pretty significant migrations. The Bruno herd would go all the way out past the confluence. The Bruno and Jarbidge, not every year. A lot of it was snow dependent or hunter pressure dependent, but that you've got that north-south movement there. And then like Travis talked about for the other portions of 6, and you have the elk that would leave Bull Run Basin and go all the way out to the southern end of the Owyhee Desert, extending almost all the way into and sometimes into Area 5 over in Humboldt County, and then those elk going out to the confluence of the East Fork and the South Fork. So very long migrations. 40, 60 miles, and I think that's kind of normal for these northern herds. And then the stuff more in central Nevada, I think that's more of just an elevational movement, but it's really neat strategy that they have in just trying to maximize input from forage and trying to get out of snow loads.
And what could be challenging to the second question about where they might shed their antlers is they're out there for the winter time, but they're shedding their antlers typically late March, early April. And where they are at that time of year is anybody's guess, because a lot of times they're on their way back to summer range, or like you say, elevationally, there might be a fog bank, so they're a little bit higher, or so it can be challenged to find antlers if that's what you're going out for specifically. It's not exactly one basin every year. It can be very variable throughout the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear that term, riding the green wave, and I think that very much is what we see in these elk, whether it is elevational or long distance, and that they're just trying to follow that green up as it comes in the springtime, because they just got done with winter. They're likely in the worst nutritional condition that they've been in, and they just need to start putting on calories so that they can get ready for the spring. For females, they can start they can calve and lactate. Our bulls at that point are shedding, and then they're gonna immediately start putting new antler on right afterwards. And so it's just an energetically expensive lifestyle, and so as an elk, you gotta find ways to capitalize on it as best as you can.
Yeah, especially those bulls too. I mean, during the rut, they'll often quit eating almost entirely, and they'll lose 20% of their body weight between the rut and winter, and so they're really coming out, and at a negative, and so they got a lot to build back before they start putting resources into their antlers, and that's what makes the mature bull. That antler size a signal for the mate. An animal that can lose that much weight every year and then grow that much on the top of its head is a true signal, an indicator of that animal's fitness, its ability to take advantage of the landscape, to prove to that cow that it's got good genetics, it's got good resource selection, it's got good intake ability, and so yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Trav. One of the questions, I think we've answered it: do elk shed their horns? And with all deer species, that is the case. These elk, or our elk, shed typically in the springtime. Obviously, shed hunting is a pretty popular recreational and for some economic activity. But we do have a shed season here in Nevada, so if you're going to collect shed. All right, we're back again. The challenges of elk camp are real, but I think we're working through it. Yeah, take 4. So I was mentioning our shed antler hunting season, in which you can go out and collect antlers, both for yourself, or some folks choose to sell them. We do have a closure here that starts January 1st, and it goes until May 1st. If you're going to pursue shed antlers from May 1st to June 1st, you have to have an online certificate to be out in the field. So just keep that in mind to avoid any inadvertent infractions or getting crosswise with folks that you may not want to.
And the reason is for kind of what Travis was alluding to, in that those animals are in really tough condition that time of year, and so we just need to, people go out, sometimes we see that folks are out going across country and harassing animals and stuff, and we're just making sure they get through the winter before
Absolutely.
that comes
Yeah, and they've
in.
had pressure from hunters since August, so it's been really a long time. So to give them that little bit of reprieve until May, it makes sense.
And I know that this isn't grouse talk, but there is some overlap between our active leks and when shed season happens. And not only are we trying to protect our native deer and elk and others, but we're also trying to keep an eye out for grouse, which we're certainly having a tough go at it.
Absolutely.
So we did get another question. I'm going to ask you guys if you want to kind of chime in on it, and that's going to be, and I will remind folks, if you do have any questions, we're going to be wrapping up soon, here in about 10 minutes, so please send those in. But we had a great one, and that was, how can I get involved with elk management here in the state, whether that's planning or getting out and boots on the ground and doing some habitat projects.
Well, folks can certainly, we'll say one of them, which I know that NDOW is really good at soliciting volunteers. There's always a lot of projects, seed collection and water development building going on. We're going to start doing more fence removal if we can. All these things that benefit a variety of wildlife in Nevada. So getting on the list, which you can look at our NDOW.org and sign up as a volunteer and get involved that way on habitat projects. Folks could show up to their local county advisory board meetings. A lot of people aren't even aware those go on, but the meeting schedules are always on our website. People can come, any member from the public that has any concerns can come and speak to those. How about elk planning? Do you have ideas specifically for that, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting the process of revising our statewide plan, which is a little bit different than our local subplans, in that the statewide plan is just an umbrella document that guides management within the local areas. We don't have population objectives specific to those plans, but it does provide overall guidance. And if you're interested in learning more about that program, about that revision, reach out to the department. We'll be able to get you in touch with the right folks if you want to follow along the progress and have an opportunity to provide input. With that, you mentioned coming and providing concerns at those meetings, but if you want to come and provide praise, we'll certainly take that. In fact, I know we had one comment from a follower that recently moved to Alaska, and they just wanted to give us a shout out that they think we do a great job. So you guys,
we'll
kudos
always take
there.
that too.
Right. So before we wrap this up, I think we all have our own experiences with elk in the field, and Matt was kind of mentioning one that he had with a recent elk hunt, muzzleloader bull hunt. I don't know if you want to talk about that experience or not, but let's just hear a little bit about something that happened to you that you want to tell the world about, or tell our followers about.
Yeah, I had one on when Kari was talking about elk bugling and the rut, and just how crazy bulls can get and how love struck they can get. I had a muzzleloader bull tag in 2015, and I had a dry fire, and I made the fatal mistake of lifting my gun up instead of keeping it on the target, and the gun went off while I was holding it up, and the bull just turned around as the smoke's rolling out of the mahoganies and let out a big old bugle and just looked right at me, and had 7 cows with him, and they were wandering off, and he just kept bugling at me while I reloaded and was able to harvest that bull. So that was a really fun experience, and it really does just show how crazy things get in the rut. And then on a on a professional level, I think some of the most exciting stuff that I've seen was just when I started in Area 6, there was this game of who saw the biggest elk herd, and it was like 500 at the time, and then it was 650, and then it was 800, and it maxed out. I believe Kari was in the back seat with me. It was a concentration of 1,400 elk. It wasn't in Nevada, but it was a mix in Nevada and Idaho and Duck Valley elk, and it took us well over an hour to classify 1,400 elk, and it was just quite the sight to just look out on this big flat desert and just see 1,400 elk all staring at the helicopter wondering what was coming next. So I thought that was really awesome.
No, I appreciate that, Matt. You gave us a little personal and professional feedback. So I'm going to kick it over to Trav and see what you can lean on here and hear about something fun from your background.
Well, when I think about elk and hunting elk, just what gets me really excited is it's just an opportunity, especially on the antlerless hunts, to just really pack the freezer. I mean, my wife and I have been hunting cow, and I've been fortunate enough to kill a bull in that time too, but we've been hunting cow now for 7 years, and I don't think we've bought beef from a store in that period. And so I just think elk hunting is such a fantastic opportunity to get your own, meat from what's around us, and I think it's just a fantastic situation. I haven't been around professionally as long enough to have so many awesome work stories, but I share the same things. I mean, we saw a group of, I think it was 750 last year, and that was just phenomenal. And then there's other times from the air that we've just seen long ribbons of elk that just seem to go on forever over the hills, and it's just an incredible time of year to see concentrations of animals of that size. Yeah.
Thanks, Trav. And Kari, you want to?
I was just, as he said, ribbons of elk. I'll never forget back when we were kind of trying to get a handle on the Jarbidge herd. We were in a canyon that it just tended to hold bulls. And when we classify cows, you'll go six cows, 3 calves, whatever. You kind of group them together. But with bulls, you got to do points. You got to say it's a 6 point, it's a 5 point, it's a whatever. And I remember I literally ran out of spit trying to classify this group of bulls because it was 6 point, 6 point, 6 point, 6 point. I mean, there was probably 45 bulls in this herd. It's just to see that and just experience that. Since then we've kind of got a little bit more control, but that's kind of to speak to that. That's what's amazing about our hunts in Nevada. We really try to give, when a person, you wait a long time to draw a bull tag in Nevada, and when you go, you're going to have a quality experience, and you may not get the biggest bull of the year, however, but there's a good chance if you put in the effort, there's going to be a nice mature bull out there for everyone, and that's pretty cool. Other states, it's not quite like that, it's a little bit more challenging to get branched antlered bulls, but we're pretty conservative in our harvest. I think we offer a great hunt. I've been as fortunate as Travis. I've got my husband hunts as well, and so between the two of us, we've been able to harvest a lot of cow elk, and same thing, the freezer's full. I felt so lucky when the pandemic was going on and people were starting to panic about meat, and we had some meat in the freezer, and it's good, clean, quality, organic meat. And so, and the other thing I might add, if people are intimidated, elk are big animals, and if you want to get into elk hunting, because of the adaptability we were talking about, you can go have a Jarbidge wilderness experience where maybe you pack in 6 miles and do that whole thing. Or you can hunt one of these lower elevation areas where you might be able to drive a side-by-side within a mile of a good elk hunting area. But we have all different types of hunts. We've got, rolling junipers. We've got, big areas that have burned that are mostly grassland. We've got, and elk, there's elk everywhere. So I hope people aren't intimidated. It is a lot. When you get an elk on the ground, you got to have a plan, and it can be a lot of work, and make sure you have lots of friends. But but you can do it, and that's why we're here. All of us, we take a lot of hunter calls, and we're happy to help people to make their hunt successful, where to go, how to spend their time. So I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to get out there and enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks, Kari. And you said you've either got to have a lot of friends or you need to have a strong back.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Or a big plan with the horse.
I really appreciate you guys providing your experiences and talking a little bit about what you guys do today. We talked about hunting, and we all come from a hunting background, and from a conservation standpoint, hunting is very important because that money typically goes directly back into species management, whether those dollars go to habitat treatments or research projects, or other efforts to help improve populations. But you don't have to be a hunter to enjoy elk in Nevada by any means.
No.
And I would say too, I enjoy participating on other hunts as much as I do going on my own hunts, and that's because it just gives me an opportunity to be outside and experience elk and what they're doing in the field. It really is a unique thing that not a lot of people have had the chance to be out in the field during the middle of the rut and hearing all of that activity. And again, it just goes straight back into either through your hunting activities or getting out and supporting local communities, just to go out and see them. It's all part of the department's mission to preserve and protect our wildlife and provide more opportunities for those of you that want to get out in the field. So, with that, thank Julie Gabrielson behind the camera right now for helping facilitate this whole process. I think hopefully it went well, and Nicole as well.
Yeah.
And I guess with that, either we won't be back for another Creekside Chat, or we'll do it again.
We'll do it again.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do it whether there's a camera or not.
We'll take
we
the
like
feedback.
talking about elk.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Have a good one.